the New York Times gives a column to a senior Bush administration official who pushed us into Iraq. Less than 24 hours, let's get the Bushies to push us into Iran. They didn't do enough to push us into Iraq. This is Michael Doran, who is a senior advisor for the Bush administration, who wrote such gems back in the day. Following the invasion, Doran argued against international inspectors returning to Iraq to investigate once and for all the veracity of WMD allegations. His reasoning, facts and war crimes don't matter because haters going to hate regardless. Quote, the many skeptics of U.S. motives fall into two camps, conspiracy theorists and sophisticated opponents of the war, he said in May 2003. No amount of rational argument will persuade the former, who will react to any evidence of WMD with the claim that Washington planted it. After all, don't American forces today exercise unfettered control of the crime scene? For their part, the sophisticated anti-war forces never disputed the existence of WMD. What's ironic about that is Washington did plant the evidence. There was no evidence. They just planted imaginary evidence. This was the guy helping them plant it. Duran concluded, quote, the first order of business for the United States must therefore be to demonstrate forcefully that challenges to its authority in the region will be defeated, adding that thwarting Saddam's ambitions and continuing to root out bin Laden's henchmen and associates, moreover, will do more than take care of immediate menaces. It will also serve to sober up onlookers with oppositionist ambitions of their own, making them recalculate the odds of defying a power that has demonstrated its intention to remain a permanent and dynamic regional player. This is what he wrote. What the Bush administration seems to understand better than its critics is that the influence of the United States in the Arab-Israeli arena derives, to no small extent, from its status as the dominant power in this region as a whole. And this status, in turn, hinges on maintaining an unassailable American predominance in the Persian Gulf. Defeating Saddam would offer the United States a golden opportunity to show the Arab and Muslim worlds that Arab aspirations are best achieved by working in cooperation with Washington. And if American road to a calmer situation in Palestine does in fact exist, it runs through Baghdad. Yeah, this is the guy the New York Times turns to immediately to help push war with Iran. At what point do we start to acknowledge the journalists as just as complicit as the politicians making these decisions? Because at this point, we cannot imagine at an outlet like the New York Times that you could have editors this ignorant, this stupid, where these are simple mistakes they're making. They are consciously putting right away in the most prominent placement a New York Times opinion column seen all around the world has the ability to shape opinions right away on what the United States just did. They're consciously putting disgraced officials from the Bush administration who are responsible for the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people all around the world, mostly Muslims. That is who the New York Times and CNN and MSNBC, by the way, are putting forth. Not Medea Benjamin of Code Pink. Not anti-war voices. And I want to point out, there's obviously been a ton of tweets, but I want to point out a few that stood out to me. This is from Rania Khalek, independent journalist. She does some stuff for the Gray Zone and elsewhere. Number one bad guy, according to America. There are millions of people in Iraq, Iran, Lebanon, Syria who see him as a hero. He was crucial to preventing ISIS and Al-Qaeda from taking over the region, while U.S. policy helped those groups. U.S. policy from idiots like the guy who wrote that New York Times story I just read is what created ISIS in the first place. This black-white narrative is propagandistic, Rania wrote. If you think that's wrong and evil, fine. But stop making it sound like he bombed American cities. The reality is he trained people who were fighting the American bombing of Iraqi cities. So stop leaving that out. I couldn't say it better myself. And, the oligarchy, maybe YouTube, which likes to censor anti-war voices. I'm sure this live stream has already been demonetized. Will say, well, that's anti-American. And it's anti-American. He was responsible for killing however many Americans, and that might be true. But who has been more on the offense? America or Iran in the past 2 decades? Last time I checked, it was America who engineered a coup d'etat of Iran's democratically elected leader, Mossadegh, in the 1950s. Why? Because he would not give us the oil, just like Maduro would not give up the oil. He wanted to further nationalize Iran's oil, their oil. So we just overthrew that leader, which then led to unprecedented instability. Obviously, the Iranian Revolution in I believe 1979, and then hundreds of millions of dollars of propaganda fed to you by the corporate media and politicians in Washington, Democrats and Republicans, by the way. I'm not saying Iran is, the leaders of Iran are just dandy and peaceful. I'm not saying they are not responsible for some terrorist actions. Then it's not all rainbows and sunshine. Iran is not completely innocent. But if you want to talk about who has been the aggressor, Iran has not bombed American cities, just like Saddam Hussein did not bomb or take out the World Trade Center. They have not provided any evidence that Iran was behind the embassy attack in Iraq. But you don't need evidence, because the corporate media is just a stenographer for these politicians. They just feed to you what you want to hear, what the politicians tell them to say. And they are now just saying, well, the Trump administration and Mike Pompeo says there was, actionable evidence of an imminent attack on a precise location that Soleimani was responsible for. Yeah, let us see it. But they never let us see it. Just like more and more whistleblowers are coming out now saying, oh, this report about a chemical gas attack in Syria, in Doma, in 2018, there's no evidence for that either. Scientists and technical experts have come out and said there's no evidence of enhanced chemical levels in the buildings that they said Assad's people released the gas. OPCW whistleblowers that work at the OPCW are coming out saying reports were changed, information was suppressed or forced out. I also want to show you Jeremy Scahill, I think, had a great thread, of course, of The Intercept. He did a great movie, Dirty Wars, I think it was called, about secret U.S. Undercover and basically contract killers that the U.S. sends in addition to its military to go out and basically terrorize Middle Eastern countries. This is from Jeremy. Much like the neocons came to power in 2001 with a predetermined agenda for regime change in Iraq, the Trump administration had Iran in the sniper scope from the jump. This was at the center of the collusion scandal, largely ignored by U.S. media, with Israel and Saudi Arabia. A major part of the motive for the scorched earth genocidal bombing of Yemen was to draw Iran into military conflict. Obama started it, and Trump colluded with the Saudis, UAE, and Israel to escalate it. Obama was played by Saudi Arabia, but Trump outsourced U.S. policy to Israel. The assassination of Soleimani is one of a small handful of actions the U.S. could have taken that would almost guarantee war. This is a nuclear option advocated by the most dangerous and extreme players in the U.S. foreign policy establishment with the exact intent. The U.S. Congress has intentionally never legislated the issue of assassination. Instead, the policy has been to ban assassination through executive orders. This has allowed all U.S. presidents to assassinate people with impunity. Congress has always declined to address it. There's no justification for assassinating foreign officials, including Soleimani. This is an aggressive act of war, an offensive act committed by the U.S. on the sovereign territory of a third country, consistent with more than half a century of U.S. aggression versus Iran and Iraq. U.S. politicians who begin their statements justifying the death of Soleimani are by default supporting a catastrophic and illegal drive to war, and the people who will pay the price will overwhelmingly be Iranian and Iraqi civilians. Sidebar: since 2010, Blackwater founder Eric Prince has been pitching a plan for mercenaries to be used in a war against Iran. This White House actually listens to that maniac and his pitches. While warning us that Trump is the gravest threat in U.S. history, many leading Democrats have voted to give Trump unprecedented military budgets and sweeping surveillance powers. Here is an in-depth background segment we recently did on Intercepted, their podcast, on the history of U.S. aggression against Iran. What's incredible, and just for the hell of it, let's just play one of those politicians, starting, as Jeremy Scahill pointed out, with the default, well, he was a bad guy.
There is no question, Jim, that Soleimani was a vicious terrorist whose death I and no one should mourn. But this is an administration, Donald Trump, really with his national security policy, appears to shoot first and then possibly the vital questions that lead up to action are asked later. That is a foreign policy and a national security policy run amok. He pulled out of Syria without much of his national security leadership even knowing he was going to do that. Now he's assassinated, clearly a vicious killer who certainly killed and engaged and led terrorist acts by the terrorist regime of Iran. But we have to make sure that our laws are followed.
Yes, Debbie Wasserman Schultz is the first person I would like to hear from on laws being followed in a democracy. The person who rigged an entire election against Bernie Sanders. A person who has been pushing for basically us to overthrow a democratically elected leader in Venezuela. Listen, is Soleimani a good guy? No, but if the new definition is to take out brutal dictators, is to take out, terrible dictators around the world, then what are we doing? Why haven't we taken out Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, who, in addition to a culture in Syria which violates its women, in addition to that, is committing genocide in Yemen that we are supporting? If the standard is, bin Salman is a dictator, brutal, has been responsible for the deaths of tens of thousands of innocents, we need to then drone the palace in Saudi Arabia. But what's the difference here? Saudi Arabia is good for our business interests. Saudi Arabia helps the money keep flowing, baby. Saudi Arabia is helping, by the way, our energy independence, our fossil fuel companies. While Iran, they've never played ball. That's why they want regime change. Trump came out with a statement today. We're not doing this for regime change. We're not doing this for regime change. Oh yeah, what are you doing it for? Because Trump and Mike Pompeo and, when he was there, John Bolton, are so interested and so worried about the people of Iran's safety and freedom. It's the same, humanitarian concern we had when we toppled a dictator in the 1950s, Mossadegh, look it up. It's the same generosity and humanitarian spirit we have to free the people of Venezuela from Maduro's dictating terrible grasp. Oh, by the way, our sanctions have killed 40,000 people in Venezuela. But we're so worried. Hope you enjoyed that last video. Hop on over to statuscoup.com where you can sign up for our email list and become a member for as low as $5 to $10 a month. Membership is how we grow. That's statuscoup.com/join. And remember, join our email list so we can grow the revolution with you.